On the short ones, though, their butts are puckering and they're so afraid to hit them, like you see the pros hitting them on TV into the back of the cup. So that would be like the second skill. If it's 3 feet away, don't sit here and ask me for 5 minutes what way it's going to break. Just hit it hard and straight.
Exactly. Back to your virtual tea time. My name is Tori and I am your host. And today we have a really fun episode. We have Mark Milatz joining us. He is a full-time caddy at Whistling Straits. He caddied for one of my dearest longtime golf buddies, Jan Hare, when we were all there for the 2024 Creek Cup. And Jan spoke so highly of him. She actually used him as her caddy for both days, and she requested him after using him the first day. So she just adored him, and he has his own podcast called Caddie Tales and his own book that he wrote called Caddie Tales. And his book's available on Amazon. All his information is available in the show notes per usual. But we had a really fun conversation about his life as a full-time caddy. And, honestly, we didn't go through all the questions, like the normal questions of like, how much do we tip? Like all those good questions. I believe we did a episode with all of those how-to caddy questions back in like episode 11, episode 9, somewhere around there. I'll link it in the show notes. But this episode with Mark was more like really behind the scenes, and he talked about it very honestly, and he really revealed more information, and he was more straightforward about his life as a caddy and dealing with different personalities more than I expected him to, but in a good way, because I'm sure Whistling Straits is very strict and they want everyone to be professional. So he was able to really give us an inside look into what it's like, and it'd be really interesting. So I'm excited to bring you this episode. Let's get into it. Mark Milatz, here we go.
Next up on the number one tee.
All right, we got Mark Milatz here, author of Caddie Tales, and actually one of our caddies at Whistling Straits this past June. How are you, Mark?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. So what's funny is, we get back to the hotel, we get back to the American Club when we were at Whistling Straits, and I'm just scrolling social media as I do, and I just see Jan Hare's bright yellow smile driver head come up on my feed, and I'm like, there cannot be someone else with that exact driver head. And you had tweeted it because you were her caddy, Jan Hare was one of our Creek Cup participants this past summer.
Yeah, right. No, I remember her well. And I thought, you're always looking for content, first driver head I've seen like that. So she was gracious enough to let me snap a pic and throw it up.
Absolutely. I'm sure she was encouraging it, if anything. So tell us how you got to Whistling Straits and your journey to find caddying.
Yeah. So, it's a long, sordid story that could go on forever, but the short gist of it is, I struggled quite a bit in the past with alcohol abuse and addiction, and just because of anxiety and depression and stress. Actually was a pastor and also worked as a school administrator, kind of running a private school along with the church. And it's just a very grueling profession emotionally, and, it's not physical like caddying, but say much more grueling in so many other ways. And I handled my stress in isolation, and that led to bad decisions, one after the other. And eventually I decided it was time to move on and resign, and just found myself at a total crossroads in life, one that was very difficult on me and on my family. And we had been living in Michigan. We decided that it was good to get back to where my wife was from, near her family here in Wisconsin. And I had recalled the conversation I had years earlier with my brother-in-law while we were sitting around at Christmas. And he just said that the new golf course, Whistling Straits, the caddies did well there. That was all the extent of the conversation. my wife happened to grow up on a farm about 1.5 miles around the corner from it. So you surely drove past it when you went to Whistling Straits. And so when I was looking for what I would do next, I thought, okay, this will be a stopgap, a year stopgap. It's something that we'll try, hopefully just feed my family and then kind of transition and move on and see what life has next. And I just have fallen in love with it in so many ways. COVID also happened. And so that really probably kept me more grounded in it rather than looking for some other things. And so it's been just an absolute great thing in my life. It has been exactly what I needed, exactly what I was looking for, even though I didn't know that that's what I was looking for. And now we're just going to roll with it and say, as long as the body holds up, this is what I'm going to do and see what other doors it opens up.
Now, can I backtrack a little bit? You said drugs and alcohol in the beginning, you're down iffy path. Did you end up going through the program or getting sober, or did just caddying help you back off a little bit?
No, it's been a gradual progression, but I am thankfully now living a sober life. And I would say that caddying helps with that. And there's no doubt there's a challenge with it in the sense that for many, and at golf courses just in general, alcohol is a big part of it. So that's a concern that somebody who would be trying to be sober would have. But eventually just made the decision that this is something that can't be a part of my life anymore. And so what really helps with it regarding caddying is the endorphin release, the dopamine rush, that you get from walking 8 miles with bags and doing something exciting like being on a golf course. It really has helped settle the anxiety that would cause me to isolate and look for ways to self-medicate.
Yeah, I'm sober too, and I tend to isolate also. And so it's interesting that you chose this endeavor with caddying. And like you said, not only does it get you outside, walking, getting the blood flow, getting the cells moving in your body, but you're also forced to, communicate with 4 other people that are brand new strangers to you each day. And while that could sometimes give me anxiousness, anxiety, it actually, I'm sure at the end of each round, you're smiling regardless. And, when you're with 4 strangers, one of them's going to touch you in a certain way, and whatever.
Yeah. Well, and what's awesome about caddying is, for one, I guess it's an arena that I get to use some of my skill sets from my past life and the people part of the business. And there's a lot of similarities there. You're dealing with strong personalities. Sometimes you're working with people who have a very strong opinion about something that they may or may not be as knowledgeable about as they think. And sometimes there's disagreements and conflict. A lot of times it's awesome and there's strong relationships, but the beautiful part about caddying is, one, you get to have those kind of relationships built, but we always say it's a 5-hour contract. And so there are some times it's just not a fit, or these people are just not people that I'd want to spend much time with moving forward. In the past, where those were relationships that had to continue, or you had to find ways to deal with the criticism and just go on, whatever. This is a 5-hour contract and you're done.
Yeah.
And so that is absolutely freeing and helpful for me, because that was probably the number one reason why I struggled in the past, is you'd have like this hatred of conflict that's inherent to any sort of leadership position where you're at the top and not every decision is going to be popular. And trying to navigate all those challenges was very hard on me. Caddying, every now and then you'll have something where you're like, okay, I screwed up, and you can tell this person isn't really in love with me, and you have maybe some discomfort. But the scale it's on, there's just absolutely no comparison. And like I said, 90% of the time it's awesome and you love it and you're energized by it. But also little introverted part that might exist in a caddy then gets to go home and be in quiet. And then if there is conflict, you shake hands, you say, hey, thanks for the day. And then you go about your separate ways. It's a beautiful life.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Whistling Straits a little bit and Black Wolf Run. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's 2 courses at Whistling Straits, the Straits course and the Irish course. And then at Black Wolf Run, there's Rivers course, the par 3 course, and then is there another one there, the championship course?
Meadow Valley, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you go to all different courses, or do you stick straight with the Straits? How does it work for you?
Yeah, we generally have 2 separate crews. So there's a crew over at the Black Wolf courses working on Meadow Valley and the river.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a crew over at the straights working on the straights and the Irish. Now, if you see somebody from Black Wolf Run come over to our course, to be quite blunt, it probably means they got tipped a huge amount and they're kind of following those players over to our place. And then, I will be asked to go over to Black Wolf Run sometimes. But to be honest, I just don't think I would provide great service going to a course a couple times a year, like not knowing those greens intimately or not knowing the course as well. And so, yeah, there's that part of you that's like, hey, this person just threw out a big tip and we hit it off. But I don't know. I don't necessarily want to go over there and do a bad job. So I stick to the straights and to the Irish, and most caddies do.
What's a harder walk? Which course at the straights?
Yeah. So the straights, and usually on the Irish course, you're caddying, so people are on carts, and you're running around. So, but I personally prefer bag carrying to caddying much more because you have two players, so it's much easier to make a connection as opposed to when you have four. And if you have four people spraying the ball around on a caddy loop, it's actually pretty tough to get around to all of them and meet their needs. And so I like bag carrying for the most part. There's days like we had a day recently. Well, we've had too many of these days, whether the wind is just howling and the bags are super heavy and you're just exhausted by the end of it. But for the most part, I really enjoy those relationships that can be built, the conversations that can be had, and the service you can provide.
Yeah. We actually walked the Irish course, and it wasn't until the end when I was absolutely exhausted. And it was so hot that day because you were with our group that day, right?
Yeah, I was with your group both days.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it was like 81 degrees and humid. It might have even been hotter than that. And it was a really hard walk. And so we finished 18 and I'm like dying over sitting near the caddy shack. And they're like, yeah, usually people ride that course. I'm like, oh,
that was an option. Yeah.
I thought it was walk only.
And I'll tell you what, that was probably an easier day physically for most of the caddies. And I'm sure we'll get to talking more about women and golf specifically. But for the most part, not always, they tend to hit the ball a little less all over the place.
Yes.
And so, people will ask us, how long of a walk is this? On Whistling Straits, which is where I do the majority of my loops, it varies from like 7 to 10 miles. And I had one this year that was like one loop, like 10 and a half miles. And, that's just one person's hitting it way left, one person's hitting it way right. You're all over. And you're pretty beat by the end of that.
Yeah, I would hope so. Oh my God. Okay, so let's actually get into what I wanted to kind of use as our episode outline today. You posted on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. Sorry, X.
Yeah, so do I.
Is that your main social media platform where you spend most of your time?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, it seems like it. You post daily and maybe multiple times a day, but you posted kind of like recap or an update because you're 2/3 through the season. And so you go through all these bullet points, and I think that they're so interesting, and I just thought we could make conversation from there. And so if you don't mind, let's just go through them, what you posted today. Sure. Okay, so the first thing you said, again, he's 2/3 through the season. He's full-time caddy at Whistling Straits. So far, you have had approximately 2 million steps.
Oh. Yeah, and I was hoping it would actually be a little bit more. But yeah, that's averaging probably just under 20,000 steps a loop. So I'm guessing the Apple Watch is accurate enough. That's how I gauge it all. But, over 100 loops now. And so about 2 million steps. And it's kind of fun when you put it in that terminology.
Yeah. Now, and you can refer back to when you just started caddying, but are you exhausted every day? Or like, what is it like? What's the wear and tear on your body like?
So it's so much better now than it was. And I remember my first year, I didn't know how it worked with the scheduling there and the whole thing about double loops and whatever. My first day was on a Thursday. And the next day I was scheduled on a Friday. And you have to put in the context of our regular schedule where we were going to be scheduled for like double loop times and all this wasn't set for a couple of weeks. So it was just kind of random until then. And literally I'd only been there for 2 days. And I had this report time and the guy from one of the managers runs out on a cart. And I happened to be on the Irish course that day. And I was carrying 2 bags, which I wasn't even supposed to be doing yet. They tried to have you do 1 bag for a bunch of loops, but they were so busy. They're like, can you do 2 bags? I'm like, sure. And went out there and the manager comes out and goes, you guys are turning and burning, going again. I didn't even know that was like a possibility. Like I wasn't.
You're like, what do you mean?
I wasn't mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically prepared in any way for that. And I went into the manager's office and I felt horrible. I didn't know the Caddie master, but a few words to him. And my hands are literally locked up. I'm pulling my fingers apart. And the Caddie that I was with still makes fun of me 6 years later, how I was like, I don't think I can provide quality service. Like I'm like trying to figure out what do I say. And Caddie Master, thank God, had mercy on me and he figured it out and sent me home. But then I felt terrible. Well, then my in-laws, this was May yet of 2019, and my family wasn't moving to Wisconsin until June of 2019. So I was staying with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law showed up. They wanted to see how I was doing and try to support me. And it was like 6:00 and I was already in bed down in the basement, falling asleep because I was just so miserable and tired. And so, yes, that was what it was like. And I still remember my first double loop, just honestly praying for the sweet release of death, not knowing how I was going to make my way through it. And I was working with one of the larger characters in the shack, and I write this in my book, and he's like giving me this whole talk about how to navigate the course more efficiently and how Whistling Straits really isn't a resort course, so I better learn from the veterans. And I'm like not understanding a word he's saying and almost like in tears and knowing that these players are probably like thinking I'm the worst caddy in the world. So yes, physically, it has been very grueling. I've prepared for it better. Your body gets in better shape for it. But also I'm 6 years older than I was and nearing 50. Mm-hmm. And it's like you can feel it. It takes a toll. And I joke about like these young guys in their 20s. They'll do 2 loops, go to the bars till like 2 a.m. And like yesterday, I saw it in a couple of them. It was clear for the Labor Day holiday weekend.
Oh, they were
Sunday
they
night.
were partying for sure.
Yeah. And so then they're out. Yesterday was an early report time for me. I'm there at 7 a.m. and some of these guys are showing up basically blind, but they'll go 2 loops. And I'm like, for me to get up and work today, I had to put on recovery boots, have my kid run a Theragun on me, be in bed by 9 o'clock,
like
get
ice
up and drink
bath.
a pot of coffee. It's like, I envy their youth. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, that is too funny. You just mentioned a couple of things. So you do those things to help you prepare for that. Is there anything else? Like you have to obviously keep yourself well hydrated, well fed to keep the energy up throughout the day.
The thing I do better at is hydration. You can't drink enough, and by the time you're feeling thirsty, it's too late. My wife gets on me because I don't pack like a lunch, or one of the problems I have, and this hasn't been good for like maintaining weight loss, is I'll be so famished by the end of the day that I'll stop it somewhere. A couple weeks ago, I got $28 worth of Popeye's chicken. I'm like,
I love it. No, honestly, while you're talking about your 2 million steps and double loops and all of this, I'm thinking I would go home after 2 loops and there would be no stopping me. I would be eating everything in sight because I could. Yeah. Like, because you're so famished and you just walked 30,000 steps in one day. It's like, give me all the food. Yeah. There's another caddy, especially that me and him will send pictures of, our bowl of ice cream at night or what we're having. Post-round meal. Yeah. But pretty carnivorous, that's for sure. I love that. So I think that's going into your next bullet point. Calories burned around 136,000. Calories consumed a lot more than 136,000. Oh my God, so relatable. I mean, Mark, I am a food addict, so I can appreciate the $28 worth of Popeye's chicken. That actually seemed low to me, but I haven't been to Popeye's in a while. So I don't know. And I've made a deal with my wife because she'll get annoyed sometimes if I stop and spend money picking up food. But we've made a deal that if I do 2 loops in a day, I get to stop and do whatever I want. Yes. And she's cool with that. Yes. Because that's like one of the things that gets me through is like, okay, I'm going to get that huge Jimmy John's sub when we're done or whatever. So, yeah. I'm a tournament player. And when I have a tough tournament day and I'm on my way home and I call my husband and I say, I'm having pizza tonight, he knows to just like back off. Like just, okay, it's been one of those days. Okay, hole-in-ones witness 2 this season. That's exciting. Yes. And both on hole 12 this year. The thing, and I don't know if you remember the course well, but it's actually for people who've been there, kind of an iconic hole in this. Well, it's a short par 3. It's the number 18 handicap. But the thing about it is the green is so big and contoured in a way that if the flag is on the back right,
It is not the 18 handicap. We call it the shortest par 5 in America then. And it's so visually intimidating to people. And they just walk up and they're like, what the heck? Well, the guy who got a hole in one there was actually from France, and he spoke English, but it was clear he wasn't super comfortable. And it was a little bit of a different loop in that he was a single random player and my other player was a single random player, which is pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't know each other, and he steps up, and we hadn't talked much during the loop because of the language issues, whatever. And he gets a hole in one. And then, then I felt like the UN ambassador or something, bringing the hugging and like bringing these people together. And
the national anthem start playing in the background.
Right. And it happened to be during the Olympics. So I tweeted out that, it was the most impressive thing a French athlete was going to do that day, even though the Olympics were in Paris, because it's like, it is so hard, because that's probably the hole where the most hole-in-ones are, but it's always when the flag is like 90 yards away on the left side. And so this was tough. So, and then the other one was there on that same hole, but on an easier position. So that makes 7 for my career, but it's always a thrill.
They're always fun, and everyone that gets one is super excited, I bet.
Yeah, for sure.
So we had a hole-in-one in our group the second day.
Yes.
I don't know if you were around that group, but it was more on the front nine.
I was like 1 or 2 groups behind them. My players were getting texts.
Okay.
Hey, I can't remember her name, but so-and-so got a hole-in-one.
Yeah, it was April. What hole would that have been? Like 6 or 5, somewhere around there?
No, I think she was on 3.
3,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was in that back pin location where it just kind of funneled in, but that was a blast. Yeah. Okay, birdies on a hole. Now, on hole 18. Okay. Hole 18 is really tough. Every time I played at number 18, I was like, is this a par 5? This has got to be a par 5. Like, can this please be a par 5 somewhere? It's a tough hole. So are you saying 3 birdies on hole 18, like in your group? Or just total?
This season.
Wow.
Total this season. Yeah. And that's a record. So in 6 years, it's 12. I started counting because like my first year, I realized I had gotten through the whole season and like nobody had gotten a birdie.
Wow.
And then that question, is this a par 5 on that hole? And then another one, hole 15, when we're into the wind. I probably get asked that 3 times a week. Is this a par 5? And then you look at them and tell them no, and they have this defeated look on their face. But no, this year, 3, and I've had 12 in 6 years. So averaging about 2 a year. And out of that 12, like 3 or 4 have been somebody like chipping in from off the green. So it hasn't even been like they've played the hole the way it's, designed to be played or whatever. You've gotten lucky, you know.
So almost based on your stat, you're almost getting a hole-in-one is almost good of a chance as getting a birdie on 18.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Sure. Yeah.
That's great. It's a tough hole. And I don't remember 18 being played at all in the last Ryder Cup. Like that.
Not as much as it should have been.
Okay. Pair of shoes. So you just bought your 3rd pair. Is that common?
Yeah.
Like you go through 3 or 4 pairs a season?
Yeah. And, once you get to be one of the older guys like me, that's your number one expense. You don't spare. Like my first year, I remember because we have to wear like white shoes, hard to find. And I remember going on the cheap and learning right away. That's just not what you can do. You still see some younger guys who are doing it. But for me, I've got to buy the $170 pair of Hokas and consider it part of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. And is that, you can find an all-white pair of Hokas?
No, actually, that's what this year they laxed it that we could get light gray, with this. So I've got the light gray pair of Hokas. But that's just this year that they kind of gave in because caddies are like, you can't find an all-white pair of shoes. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with you there. So what else about your caddy uniform are some rules? Like, I know it's an all-white caddy bib. Anything else as far as appearance is concerned? Like, do they let you have facial hair? Or?
No. You can have a pre-existing beard, I think. And, but like if you didn't come in with it at the start of the season, I guess you can't grow one. We'll get reminders every now and then. You can't have a 5 o'clock shadow. I think it's one of those things that probably is enforced as much as players might complain about it, which I think has only happened when they have people who are like at control and they mention maybe on their evaluation, the caddy didn't look super kept up or whatever. Exactly. But we have the uniform, which, I don't mind But, there was a couple days this last week or 2 weeks ago where it was like heat index of 100. I mean, I basically ruined that thing. It was like you jumped into the lake and it was that soaked. And underneath, we're supposed to wear like all white. And, you can get away with wearing a darker shorts or whatever. But like on those days where you're soaked through with sweat, you can see. So the manager might say something.
Yeah. They don't look like there's a lot of airflow.
No, and they're not super flattering on a fella like me either. So, but yeah, they. But, it's just part of whatever. I think it makes the players feel cool when they roll up and they see caddies who are those, they see it at Augusta on television and it's got that vibe.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I do understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on to your next bullet point, most popular golfer drinks, double transfusion, spotted cow, and high noon. No surprises there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like if people are going to drink transfusions, they go all in and get doubles. And probably one of my most popular tweets of the last year is when you compare the player on the day one of their golf trip versus day 4, because like day 1 you're meeting guys and they're all ready to go.
They're
and it's
hyped.
like double transfusions. By day 4, they look like they're need to be hooked up to an IV and need a transplant or something. So, yeah. And then Spotted Cow is part of New Glarus Beer Company, which only sells beer here in Wisconsin. So it's a marketing genius because it makes, I think, a good beer seem like the greatest beer ever to people who don't live in Wisconsin. So they just want to load up on it. And I just caddied for a corporate group for the group that puts out High Noons. And they were saying that they did not like High Noon. I said, I'm surprised who drinks High Noon. And they said, yeah, it really turned into like all these guys golfing wasn't maybe the original demographic.
Yeah.
But guy golfers have really helped their sales just skyrocket.
Yeah. No, High Noon's gone bananas. So, okay. So you talked about how their appearance might change or their eagerness to drink from day 1, day 4. How does their desire to play well fluctuate if you see someone on day 1 opposed to day 4 of their golf trip?
Yeah. The whole vibe, everything about it is different. 99% of the time, you want nothing to do with a group that's there on their last day.
Oh, really? I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. For one, if they don't have a caddy that's gone with them, it sends the vibe that maybe they're not the most generous, which isn't always true. But
no, I understand that though.
2, they're just usually not as good. They're tired. They've been drinking. They haven't gotten good sleep. I was with some guys this past week, super cool guys, and they had gotten a package, where they played all the golf courses. There was a group of 8 of them. And I think half of them talked the other half into adding the straights on one more day. And so then they had to go pay for the straights as not part of the package. I think probably double the cost. I don't even know.
I'm sure.
And they had to pull out the credit card for that again. And so I think it hit some of them like, whoa. But more so, they're like, yeah, I'm tired. And they were still driving down to play Erin Hills the next day. They're like, we would have been good with a day off. Mm-hmm. So through that round, their motivation to go look for a ball or win the hole was, I'm sure, far less than it had been a couple days earlier when they played the course.
Yeah.
And so that's very commonplace. Like, they're just not as good. They're just tired. Their swing is wiped out. They either get, very frustrated, or I'd say more often than not, it's like a who gives a crap kind of mentality.
Yeah. So our Creek Cup event, which was when you saw our group at Whistling, that is a 3-day event. And whenever I put it together, I think, God, that's so short. It's a good investment, but it's a short amount of time. But every year when we're done with that event, it's like, that's actually the perfect amount of time, because you're able to give high energy for 3 days. And then it's like, okay, time to go home. Great.
Yep. I think that, I've talked about this with my buddies that like, I want to do a 2-night, 3-day golf trip when we set one up, my caddy buddies. And because I think everyone's instinct is to do 4. And I'm like, but I want to have that feeling of wanting more, not hate, I've just seen it too often. So I think 3 is ideal.
Yeah.
And I would add, for anyone listening out there who's planning a golf trip and say there's a pinnacle golf course that you want to play it first. Don't fall for saving the best for last, because I understand the thought process, but play the best when you're fresh.
Yeah.
You'll enjoy it more.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, next bullet point, most asked questions. Do you do 2 loops every day? What do you do in the winter? And what hole did Jordan Spieth almost fall in the water on? First off, I'm a sucker for number 3. I did ask that to the caddy, and I'm sure he was rolling his eyes when I asked it, because you probably get asked that every single time.
Literally, people say what hole, and Caddie's interrupt them and just say 17 before the question's even out. Yeah.
Yep, I can fall for that one.
Yeah.
So how often do you do 2 loops a day?
I'm scheduled to do it 3 days a week, but it doesn't always work out that way. I'm fine if I do it 15 to 20 times in the season. 15 times is a lot for somebody like me.
Yeah.
If you did it 2 loops every day, I've said to people, like, you die. Like, I say to this person, you're on hole 13 and you look like you need an oxygen tank. And I will say, I probably spend more energy trying to get out of doing 2 loops in a day than the energy that it would take to actually do the second loop. I'm not a big fan.
I don't blame you. So what do you do in the winter?
So I worked at a cheese factory one winter. There was COVID one winter, so that kind of screwed things up. But my goal is to the opportunity to see where some of this golf caddy and stuff takes me as far as generating some side income that continues to grow. My book last winter did really well and allowed for me to kind of be able to work from home and start planning future work. And this winter, I really want to hone in on getting more stuff out. Have just recently started kind of developing some merchandise that I want to get out there, and we'll see where it takes us. So that is my long-term goal. And I think I have 2 kids in college and then 2 kids still at home. When they're out, my wife and I have talked about maybe going somewhere where it's a little easier caddy on an easier course for caddy and somewhere warmer.
Yeah.
And maybe just make enough money to pay for the lodging that we have there for the winter. That's something that we'd like to be able to do.
Yeah. Because you'd say probably, is there a good handful of caddies that just go caddy somewhere south for the winter?
Say we have 200 caddies in our program. I'd say about half are guys that are from somewhere else who come up here for the summer, or they either head out to Scottsdale area or Florida, Georgia, Texas, whatever, South Carolina. And then the other half are kind of full-time older guys like me or college students.
Yeah. Okay. Skill I wish golfers were better at. Lag putting.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Out of the entire golf repertoire, I mean, there's so much to do with golf, and we just want you to be better at lag putting.
Yeah, it's because it's like, obviously we want our players to feel good and be happy, and we want to feel like, we're doing a good job. Yeah. And so, some of our greens are so huge, but people they'll fall in love with a line or whatever, and never even get the ball even close. And so the second putt, they're constantly leaving 20 feet, 30 feet. Yeah. It's so then you're just 3-putt, 4-putt. And if we could just put that first one a little closer, it would make everybody's day a little better.
Yeah. And it just screws with the golfer's confidence too. After you have a couple of those 3-putts, you're it wreaks havoc on your putting throughout. So do you think what's the percentage of people leaving it short versus blowing it by the hole?
I would say that for us, the majority are blowing it by the hole.
Really?
Because because they're fast greens. And so then you're constantly having people just either they're pulling it because they're so nervous and kind of just yanking it far past. They're just like, oh my gosh, these are lightning. And they just don't get a feel for them for quite a few holes. So I'd say that's probably the majority. On the short ones, though, their butts are puckering and they're so afraid to hit them, like you see the pros hitting them on TV into the back of the cup. So that would be the second skill. If it's 3 feet away, don't sit here and ask me for 5 minutes what way it's going to break. Just hit it hard and straight.
Exactly. Exactly. But that reminds me, when you talk about the players being nervous, is there something that you like to do in the beginning of the round or when you just meet them and you're picking up their bag for the first time that you think helps them kind of relax, at least not get nervous around you? Because there's something to be nervous around the caddy for.
If I was generalizing, you have 2 different groups. So you have the players who are on the opposite side of the spectrum, who come with such an arrogance and lack of humility that your job is actually to kind of bring them back down to earth about what course they're about to go play and maybe what the conditions are, and get the expectations more realistic. And so I'd say that's half the loops. And then the other are the people who are very much nervous. What me and other caddies will often tell them is, look, we've seen everything.
Yeah.
We've seen every kind of golf. You're not going to be the worst.
Yeah.
And also I always say to them, I don't care if you're good or bad. On the list of things that matter out here today, whether or not you're a great golfer isn't in the top of my list. And so we want you to have fun. We want you to do it at the pace that is keep up with the people in front of you and be a cool person. And we're going to have a great day.
Yeah.
And you'll find, okay, most people are like, oh, okay, good. And one of the things that I do think I am good at as a caddy is that I do tend to have more of an encourager vibe to me.
Yeah.
And so really hit it off quite well with those players that are kind of in that category of being humble and realistic and nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, next up, most golf balls removed from bag pre-round. This is hilarious. Does anyone want to guess? I'll take 3 seconds for you to guess how many balls Mark has taken out of a golf bag to lighten it up before a round. Mark, how many was it?
This year, 30, yeah.
Okay, so 30 balls. Was that person thinking like they really needed 30 balls? Like they
Absolutely.
They were probably thinking, should I take 35?
I left like 20 in there, kind of chill them out, and make them not so nervous. But I'm like, if we lose more than a ball a hole, either I'm really, really bad at looking for balls, or you're so bad at golf that we're going to be picking the ball up and moving it.
Exactly. We're going to play a little scramble format.
Yeah. And I want to say that person lost 4.
Yeah.
I think that's what the number actually was. So yeah, some people are crazy. Again, you meet 2 different kinds of people at the bag drop. You have the person who is like, is this okay? Is this okay? How many balls are you sure this is light enough? And then you have the other people who have absolute tanks. And you're like, hey, is there anything you don't need today? Help me help you move a little quicker out there. And they'll be like, well, I think I took out everything I could. And you're like,
and it's still like 60
sunny,
pounds.
And you have an umbrella in there, and you have rain gear in there, and a pair of shoes and all that. I've seen golf bags with 50, 60, 70 balls in them. To be fair, to be very kind, some people just never play with a caddy, and that's been on the back of their cart. But I'm always like, well, what did you think? Like, when you woke up this morning, did you not think about having a caddy? Or like
someone's gonna be carrying this bag?
Did you not like take a moment to consider this? Usually it's like people who are on a corporate loop who aren't doing this except for like they want a trip or whatever, that you'll find some of that stuff.
Yeah. I always tell the players that come on my trips, like, first of all, the caddies will find 96% of your golf balls. Like, they know exactly where you're hitting them. They've been there before. Like, they know where it goes. You're not going to lose as many balls as you think you are. Like, we always think it's this dramatic number. And really, it is like 2, 3, maybe 4 on a bad day. Like, it's not that many.
Yeah, and in your trips with the ladies, it's even less. Like, you don't lose a ton.
Yeah. Any advice to the listener? Like, what are the bare necessities you need in your bag when you have a caddy?
Yeah.
Like clubs, balls, what else?
Clubs. And I would even say, like, it always annoys like a caddy when like a player's like, well, I don't even hit these clubs, so I don't even know why I brought them. You're like, we could have taken them up. No, clubs, balls, a reasonable amount, a golf glove, and then a ball marker and some tees. It's like, maybe a snack if you want, but they have the carts around and people make their living off of those. So maybe just buy something from them. And then I can't think of much more. The time where the caddy just has to suck it up is when the weather is kind of like, what we have is either there's going to be weather coming like rain, or it's sometimes on Whistling Straits, it's like there's holes you need to jacket. And then there's another hole where you're burning up because you're off the lake, or it's like, so yeah, you're going to carry some stuff some days, but I think most caddies will tolerate carrying a speaker if people are playing it, but not everybody has to have a speaker.
I find at these courses that are just stunning and it's like an experience and you have caddies, sometimes you just don't need music like you normally use just at your home course. Like you just want to take everything
look around.
In. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And groups that say we play fast, all of them. And then groups that play fast, not all of them. And I think to myself, God, I always tell the caddy that I play fast group. Like just like my foursome. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we're not. I don't know. But it is so funny that we all think we're fast.
Yeah. And the thing that I've caught on is when the starter is given their little spiel about pace of play, whatever, it's the group that says, oh, you won't have to worry about us, that you have to worry about, because they lack humility and they're obviously not understanding what's going to happen. Yeah. But the big reason why is so people are playing matches if they come with like their country club group or they're in a group like you bring or whatever, which is fine. I mean, it makes it more fun. I get it. But they're playing it like they watch people play on television. Well, on television, that person has one caddy for each player. There's 2 players in a group. Those players hit fewer shots. And so we are kind of doing the same thing with either, how long we look for a ball or how long our pre-shot routine is. And certainly on the greens, we're doing the same things, but we've got 4 players, 2 players to each caddy. We're hitting 7 or 8 shots for some people instead of 3. And so it just can really slow down. And especially some groups, and I find this more when it's a group that comes from the same country club, and they have like 5 foursomes or whatever, they just think they own the place. And when they are putting, it's as though they are, they're engineers trying to, calibrate some formula, whatever. And it just gets a little out of hand sometimes because I don't mean this to be condescending. I am not a great golfer, so I am judging no one, but they're not going to make it most of the time anyway. And I have not seen people overthink things and do better. And I think that most people do better when they're not like filling their head with 1,000 things and they step up and let their muscle memory and their natural athletic ability and talent take over and hit the ball.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of times what I tell myself in my head, like your body knows what to do. Step up. You already know the feel of this putt. Just go up and do it. Like there's your line kind of thing.
Real quick, I caddied for a gal who was a golf coach, and she played golf in college, and her husband's now a golf instructor, and they were really good, but they were super cool. And neither one of them plays enough anymore for them to have super high expectations, but they're both talented and good enough that it was still better than most of my rounds. But anyway, she was extremely decisive on the greens. And I asked her, I said, were you like this when you played college golf? I mean, you just step up and hit. And she's like, you look, and she's like, I can pretty much see what's going to get me within 3 feet. And if I can't do that, I've got bigger problems. And I'm like, oh, I love you. So,
That's a good little tip, though. Like, you're not looking to make the putt 99% of the time. You're just looking to get within 3 feet. Makes the hole a lot bigger, too. I got to imagine as a caddy, it is more fun for you, though, to have a game within the group. Or does it not matter?
Yeah. Most times, for sure. The only times it's not is when it's like, you're falling behind and you've been talked to by the player assistant 3 times. And now all of a sudden, these guys who've said we play fast are now griping and cussing and saying, don't rush me, I paid a lot of money. Then the vibe's not as fun, know. But most times, like, and if there's a little money on the line or, if you really like your players, it's certainly a lot of fun. And every now and then, I don't do it as often as some other caddies, but you might say, hey, $10 for my guys versus your guys.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah, for sure. So does your tip get larger when the score gets lower?
You'd like to think so. I would say that 90% of our tips seem to be predetermined. Like the people are going to tip you what they decided to tip you. But there's no doubt that you connect on some loops that become magical with guys.
Yes.
Who play and then they win their match. And the challenge is then they always want you to go with them again. And my reluctance is it's hard to recreate the magic.
Yeah, like just take what you got, remember it, and move on.
Yeah, like it's like just because we did this today, golf is a funny little beast, and tomorrow is a different day. And so just be careful, because I don't want to take all the credit for them making the putts they made. So I don't want to take all the blame the next day when they don't go in either. So,
I've had a handful of those magical rounds that you're speaking of. And I have to say, when I finish the 18th hole and I have that beautiful scorecard and that amazing day, and usually the weather's perfect and everything is just aligned to like the most perfect golf day ever, I am giving all my money to my caddy. I'm like, take it all. Take it all. Do you want my firstborn child? What do you want? Because it's such... Like you said, it's just magical. It's everything.
You can tell when it's good number of players who they could tip you double, triple, and it makes no difference to them. On their bottom line. We have some very well-off players. And so you can tell, though, like when somebody is tipping you extra because, like I said, most loops, somebody just goes and grabs something out of their thing and it's clear the group had decided what everyone said, whatever. But this person's got out their wad or whatever. And they pause. And then they pull out another one. And it's like, okay, those are people who are happy with your service. And that makes you feel good.
Okay, biggest tip. Now that we're on the tip money, more than I deserve, you said. And then smallest tip, still probably more than I deserve. What is your relationship like with the tips that you receive? Like, are you able to disconnect from whatever you get?
Yes, because I've done this long enough now that it's like, I've done loops before where I'm pretty sure that people would ask me to like care for their children if they were to die or something.
Yeah.
And they want me to like come for Christmas or something. And I get tipped less from them than somebody who we don't say 10 words to each other. It's a weird thing that happens on occasion. I am thankful enough for this job to realize there are far more good days than there are bad days. And I am getting paid even on my lowest day. If somebody tips the lowest suggested amount, I'm making more per hour than I could find anywhere else. And I get to walk a golf course and be around golf and be around cool people. And so I don't want to be completely money motivated with it, because obviously, like everybody, you want to be valued and stuff, but you're able to disconnect. As a matter of fact, I got, one of my largest tips I've ever gotten the other day. And you feel good and you're excited and you're like, honey, let's go out to eat or whatever. But you got to be prepared for the next day. It might, be a totally different vibe. Yeah, I'm thankful that walking a golf course with bags and talking to golfers feeds my family and pays my mortgage. How cool is that?
So cool. I love that. Let's chat briefly about 14 slot bags and head covers. And when I say head covers, that might mean iron covers too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to step on any toes, but then I kind of do. So let's talk about those.
Yes. So very rarely do we get iron covers on us, but caddies are now just like pretty bold about saying, we're going to put these in the bag. The 14 slot bag is a little shtick that now I have on Twitter just to get people fired up. Like, why? Like, I could write a whole post with the most beautiful, poetic stuff about golf. I could talk about world peace. I could bring, joy to the nations. And if I mention a 14 slot bag somewhere in that 3,000 lines, that's all that the golfer is going to pick up on. What don't you like about 14 slot bags?
Yep.
Here's the deal. If you are playing golf by yourself and you are on a cart, a 14 slot bag surely appeases your engineering or accountant mindset, because that's often who is going to have them, engineers or accountants, but not exclusively. But when you're a caddy carrying two bags, you're sometimes giving players multiple clubs because one's over here and one's over there. And then they both hand you those clubs. You're trying to race to the next ball and you've got two clubs in your left hand. And now you've got to pause, set the bags down, look for the proper slots instead of, if they just have a 2 or 3 slot bag, you go like this, slant. You put them in and you keep walking. And then if you happen to put one in the wrong slot because you're trying to hurry and keep up, that
you can't do that, Mark.
Very passively aggressively comes over and moves them and makes sure that they're not in the right slots.
Yeah. Tis.
Yeah. So it's just, there are real first world problems, and this is not one of them. Not all of us get to make a difference in this world that is profound. And this is, I guess, the one that I'm trying to make, is get a nice light carry bag with 2 or 3 slots, people.
Absolutely. And I would say to the listener or any of my players on my trips, I'd say, listen, your caddy is in charge of your bag today. Like, they're going to put your clubs wherever they want, and that's okay.
Oh,
trust me.
Yes.
99% of the time, they put it back to how it was when they received it.
Absolutely.
But in the middle of the round on the 11th fairway, if your pitching wedge is where your 7-iron is and it's all jumbled up, who cares? Just let it be.
But it's so funny. You have like people who come to golf places like ours, and maybe this is one of the drawbacks. Usually they're very successful people who are used to being in charge and, quite frankly, used to getting what they want. And so they don't always handle inconveniences or disappointments in the most laid back or charitable way. A lot of people do, others struggle. God forbid you accidentally put somebody's club in the other player's bag. We try our best to keep everybody happy and things moving, but yes, they would be easier to do if 14 slot bags were outlawed.
Yeah. Okay, well then let's wrap up with this. Your reminder at the end of your post that you put on today is, no matter where you're at on the golf course or in life, there is always a next shot full of hope and opportunity. So take yours. What can you tell? And I could tell by when we chatted with you earlier, in the interview questions that I gave you prior to this, that it's really important to you that you're a positive influence on the golfers that you take around in your loop each day. And that us as golfers to remember, we're on the golf course.
Yeah.
Who cares about your score? Enjoy your time out there.
I just look at it as part of the bigger picture. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I was ready to die. I was ready to end it all. I know that's pretty deep for a
No, that's
golf
okay.
podcast,
That's all right.
I was as low as you could go. I had hurt myself. I had hurt my wife, my children. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was scared, was lost. And I was like that for a long time, but it kind of came to a head at that point. And I spent a lot of nights not believing that there was anything good that was going to come out of life. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows now. There's still challenges every single day, and there's still carnage and there's still struggles, but we move on. Things get better if we make the right choices moving forward. And the biggest thing that I've had to get over in my life is I can't go and change the past, and I would do anything to be able to do it. And there are some relationships that are hurt or lost that it breaks my heart every day. And I let that consume me for a long time, like consume me. And eventually I had to get to that point where I give myself permission that moving on doesn't mean you're not sorry. It doesn't mean you don't take it seriously. You've just simply got to move on. And start to live a better life. And so I am not fully there, but I am moving forward each day in that process. So now you translate that to something on a much lower scale like golf. But the biggest problem I see with golfers is you have a bad shot or a bad hole, and just like it used to consume me, it consumes them. And what happened in my previous life is you make one bad decision. Well, to cover that up, or because you're scared or ashamed or embarrassed about that, you make another bad decision. And then it escalates and escalates. Well, then what do golfers do a lot? They make a bad shot, so then they don't take their medicine. They make another bad shot trying to solve it all in the next one, and then it compounds and compounds and compounds. The golfers that I am most impressed by are the ones where, and I had one like this the other day. He was a good golfer. You couldn't tell on each tee box whether he had done well the previous hole or not.
Yeah.
He just moved on. And it was just so much more enjoyable to be with that person. They did better, I'm convinced. They had a better day. And so you move on. And so there's always a next shot, whether it's on the golf course or in life, full of hope and opportunity. So instead of dwelling on the one in the past, move on to the next one. Because what can you do other than that?
Exactly. Actually, one last question. I'm curious, since golf is a activity where you do see a lot of drinking, especially on your course, and people are celebrating the day. How often are you able to chat with a player about being sober? Do you ever get to connect?
First of all, I struggled with sobriety and that life after moving here because you're so immersed in it.
Yeah.
And in the last year, I've been more willing, one, to talk to a few caddies about it. I am certainly, there's a number of caddies who are living a kind of a hard life. And if somebody wants help or a conversation leads there, I'll have it. But I am in no position to look down on anyone. So, but there are some people who, there's been some situations where I'm close enough with them where I'm like, hey, maybe trying to handle this the way you are isn't working for you.
Yeah.
On the golf course, it has led to that a few times because some people know me from Twitter or you make a connection online. They're trying to be very gracious. And those who haven't caught on yet that that's not a part of my life anymore will offer you something. And so I'll be able to say, well, one, it's against our policy to drink out here. And they're like, oh, well, we won't tell anyone. And I'll say, well, I'm off the sauce. I heard somebody tell a joke once, and I just use it now because it's funny. And I'm allergic to alcohol. It makes me break out in handcuffs. But
I like that one. I haven't heard that one.
That makes everybody uncomfortable enough that they move on. No, I'll say, no, I'm off the sauce. I try not to drink. I said I had troubles with it in the past, and then that's what led me here. And a few times this year, it has led to some talks walking down the fairway, about that in my past, how golf has helped save my life and stuff. And then there have been other people who've just known my story who are sober themselves, and they'll come and say, hey, this has really meant something to me. I've had a few people reach out to me specifically through Twitter in my DMs and say, hey, thanks for being transparent. I wasn't transparent for a lot of years. I've only recently become more comfortable with that. And the fact that I am, and that there are some people who this platform has allowed me to reach them. Well, again, how cool is that a job carrying bags and telling people the putt goes left or right leads to something like that? how awesome. So I'm very thankful for it.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing all the behind the scenes of being a caddy. And I appreciate it so much. It was great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it too. So thanks for having me and be well.
Yes, absolutely. Everything to connect with Mark is in the show notes, and go check it out.